Hello, I'm Sonia West. I'm here in Surrey at the Surrey Police Service headquarters. We're going to speak to Sergeant Lindsay Houghton of the Surrey Police Service. He's going to update us on what is actually happening in the city of Surrey. Lots of ideas have been floated around by the former Mayor Doug McCallum, the current Mayor Brenda Locke, Councillor Linda Annis, and a lot of people speculating as to what is actually happening behind the scenes. A lot of criticism of the police service, of the RCMP, as well as the Surrey Police Service, saying that they're not doing anything, they're not going fast enough, they're not giving us information. A lot of stuff goes into police investigations that we're not aware of. So we're going to speak to Sergeant Houghton and ask him details on how the process goes when someone is arrested and where it goes from there, as well as what they can do, what they can't do, and all of the ideas that are being floated around. We're going to see if they are actually viable or not. So let's take you to Sergeant Lindsay Houghton and get some answers. I'm here with Sergeant Lindsay Houghton of the Surrey Police Service. We talk to him often. He's always giving us updates. So thank you again for taking this interview, Sergeant Houghton.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. I wanted to talk to you about, obviously, the stuff that's happening in Surrey. It's, as we say, a crisis. We've heard from Assistant Commissioner John Brewer that he said it wasn't a crisis. And then, of course, we all say things right there when it's live. Reporters are in our face. People want answers. And sometimes we misspeak. So, I mean, that was a really difficult thing to have to face the wrath. And I know everybody just jumped on it. Media, myself included, we all reported on the fact that he said it's not a crisis because, in fact, don't you think that it is actually a crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt in our minds that this is a crisis. It has been for quite some time.
Yeah.
This crisis has shaken the community. It's impacted all of us. It's something that I don't think 6 or 7 months ago we could have predicted where it has gone to. Unfortunately, the beginning of 2026 has been very busy, and it looks like the number of calls and the number of extortion threats and shots fired, unfortunately, aren't going down as we start here in 2026.
Yeah, it seems like every morning I literally check my mail to see if there is another shooting, and then I plan my day around that. So every morning I open up and my email and see what is on the agenda for today. And unfortunately, a lot of times it is an extortion-related shooting that I have to go and cover. So you're right, never a dull moment, unfortunately. I do have questions for you, though. There's a lot of speculation. I guess first I want to start off by saying thank you for what you do.
Welcome.
It's really tough. I even said this to John Brewer. I said, thank you for what you do, because I don't think I would ever want to stand in the line of fire. And all you receive, hardly anyone is saying, good job, because I know there have been some arrests. Yeah. So there have been 7 arrests as far as I know. And the police are doing their job, but keeping them and not having to release them, that's not actually up to you, is it?
No, it's not. The decision to detain individuals is up to the courts and Crown Counsel, and we have to, along with Crown Counsel, prove to the judiciary that someone should be detained, and then that decision is made outside of the police. So you're right, we need to do more. 7 arrests is not enough, and there will be more arrests coming. There will be more deportations coming, but we need to collectively do more. And to do that, we need the support of the community. Yeah,
and you have the support of the community, but you also have the trepidation, the anxiety, the fear of the community. There are some ideas out there. We had Councillor Linda Annis who proposed that we check safety cameras, security cameras on traffic lights. And where are we with that idea?
Yeah, I guess I'll preface that by saying all ideas are good ideas, and so we want to hear them. A lot of the ideas we've heard over the years, whether it's gang violence or other community-related issues, we want to hear them so that we can evaluate them, see if they're things that'll work. Around traffic cameras, when Surrey Police Service became the police of jurisdiction November 29th, 2024, we had some City of Surrey staff that transitioned over to become Surrey Police Service staff. Those are civilian staff members. And before the transition, they had direct access to the City of Surrey's traffic camera system. At the transition, they lost that, unfortunately. And so we've been working with the city up until now to get that access back. Thankfully, last year, working with the city, we were able to get access through, and then we're talking after hours access, so
Yes.
evenings and weekends,
Yeah.
where the city had on call or on standby city staff that could come in, log into the traffic camera system, get our investigators information back.
Right.
Now, of course, that's not live, and often when we have very serious criminal investigations, we need live time information. So we've been working with the city to get that more live access.
Okay.
And I'm very happy to say that since December 31st, the turn of the new year,
Yes.
we've been able to get some of those staff who were previously City of Surrey staff back to get some direct access. And so we're working with the city now to work out some technical challenges around what live is and the time to be able to access that system.
Right.
But we have been able to get more access for our staff, and that's helpful to our investigators.
Right. So you're saying that you are having some technical issues with this. What is the timeline for that?
Well, I actually got a demonstration of the system on Monday. It took about 3 minutes to log in, and that might not seem like a lot of time.
Right.
But when you have a shooting and you have a car leaving a scene at 100 plus kilometers an hour, 3 minutes can mean a lot. So we're going to continue to work with the city on refining that and hopefully find some efficiencies. But I think the other part of it is in the wake of the Caps Cafe shootings last summer and other shootings, people will have seen different cameras being put up, camera trailers, and I know you've seen them around Caps Cafe. Those are our camera systems, not the city's, and those are direct feed, direct access, live for us. And I think what people will see is more of those types of systems being employed by Surrey Police Service as this continues.
Wonderful. Another idea that I've heard floated around is curfew. A lot of people are saying that that might be a good idea to have a curfew in place so that if somebody is out after those hours, you can check their credentials to see if they're a support worker, a healthcare worker, maybe law enforcement. What do you have to say about that?
Well, curfews aren't common in Canada. You have to, I would imagine, probably a state of public emergency needs to be declared. There needs to be a lot of different things put in place to have sweeping curfews put in. You can imagine that because Surrey is sort of the heart or the center of the Lower Mainland, and you have a lot of truckers and goods being delivered 24/7, a curfew would potentially impact a lot of business, and we would have to weigh the pros and cons around that. So I would leave that to more legal folks to decide whether or not a curfew could be brought in. Usually when those kinds of things are discussed, the police are the enforcers of that type of implementation versus the ones who implement it ourselves.
Right. That makes complete sense. When you just mentioned state of emergency, it made me think about the fact that a lot of people are saying, unfortunately, and I don't want to discount what you do or what the RCMP does or the task force, but is it a state of emergency? Do we need to put our hands up and say, you know what, we can't handle this? Is this out of our control as law enforcement?
Well, I think without officially declaring an official or formal state of emergency, we are in an emergent situation for sure. We're in the middle of an extortion crisis, and we have been for several months. You look at other jurisdictions in Canada, like Brampton, where they've had almost 500 reported extortions every year for the last 3 years.
And that's just reported.
And we know this is an underreported type of crime. So what we're seeing, there's probably many, many more in the community. And so there's a difference between obviously being in an emergency type situation and then a formal state of emergency, things that are declared when there's floodings like we saw out in the Fraser Valley a few years ago and other situations, wildfires and that kind of thing. That's a decision by municipal and provincial governments in order to do that. Usually when those things are declared, it unlocks powers of governments, not necessarily police.
Right. It sounds like, honestly, the hiccup is the government. We've got laws that need to be changed and you can enforce them, but you can't make them. So I think that's where the hiccup is. And I think it's a misconception by a lot of people that, the police aren't doing anything. Your hands are tied sometimes.
Yeah, you're right. You touch on a very important point. We understand and we hear it a lot that the laws, whether it's city laws in terms of bylaws or provincial laws or federal laws around the criminal code,
Yeah.
aren't tough enough. Well, you're right. We don't make them.
Yeah.
The chiefs of police in Canada often provide some guidance or advice to lawmakers, but it's our elected politicians at the various levels that make the laws. And they often receive some guidance from courts like the Supreme Court of Canada.
Okay.
And so you're very right. We don't make the laws, we enforce them. So, if there's laws that need to be changed and laws are changed all the time, our society has evolved.
Yeah.
Then we will enforce them.
Right. So we need to contact our local MPs and ask them to step up and change laws, and then you can enforce them.
Yeah, our legal system is quite complicated here in Canada, and I think most people recognize that. We have arguably one of the more complicated legal systems, and it's not perfect, and there's always, I think, room for improvement.
Yeah. What is the process when you do find a bad guy, if you will,
Yep.
and you arrest him? You
Mhm.
bring him in here, you
Yep.
shake him up. What happens? Tell me the process that goes on, not just with extortion, but in general. I mean, I know it's a difficult job, and you've got other crimes that are happening throughout the city of Surrey, not just extortion, although that's what it feels like all of our focus is on. But what is the process?
Yeah, so a bit of legal 101. So police in Canada, in order for us to arrest and detain somebody, we have to have what's called reasonable probable grounds to believe that a criminal offense has taken place. And within there's two Latin terms that we use and the lawyers use. There's the actus reus, which is the physical act of committing the offense,
Okay.
and then what's called the mens rea, the mental component of it. So meaning to commit the
Intent.
offense, the intent,
Okay.
yeah. And so regardless of what the criminal offense is, if we have the evidence and we have the admission and we have things that we can put to and prove that someone committed it,
Yeah.
and in some cases we have video and sometimes even a confession, then we can arrest somebody.
Okay.
And what we do is we have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada, and often the layperson term is we charter them, so we arrest them.
Yes.
For those that watch a lot of American television, it's the Miranda
I
rights
was gonna
known
say.
in the US.
Right.
So we read them their quote unquote rights.
Okay.
They're, like you say, they're arrested, they're searched, they're
Yeah.
brought to our holding cells, whether it's here in Surrey or Vancouver or wherever it is.
Okay.
They're told what they're being arrested for, and then they're given an opportunity to speak to legal counsel.
Okay. So you offer them a lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to. That's the law here.
Yeah.
And so they can choose to speak to a lawyer or not. We certainly encourage them to do that.
Yeah.
And then what will happen is, depending on the seriousness of the offense, they may be held in custody to do what's called a bail hearing or a release hearing, sometimes it's called. And that goes back to our conversation around someone being detained and being released. And then there are a lot of different doors that are ahead for that person. They can be detained, they can be released on we call it different types of paperwork, like an undertaking to appear. You don't often even have to take someone to jail. You can release them right there on an undertaking to appear, which compels someone to go to court as we put the case together.
Okay.
And now the complicating factor that you may remember from some of our previous discussions is we have case law in Canada called Regina versus Jordan, which starts the clock around putting a criminal case together. And now what happens is the courts and Crown Counsel have certain specific time periods in order to try a case. And that's a very important part of this. And that's often why people are released from police custody while we put all of the facts of the case together.
Okay.
Deliver that then to Crown. The person will then be rearrested in many cases, or a warrant sought for their arrest, and then they will go to court.
Okay. So when you release them, is it because you have to count the time that they're in prison or in jail, I guess?
Yeah. So the clock essentially, quote unquote, starts, and then our part of the justice system and Crown's part of the justice system has a certain amount of time to put the case together and try that case.
Okay.
And often, if you don't adhere to that time, then the case gets thrown out.
Okay. lots of things that we don't know, the different processes that you guys have to follow.
Mhm.
Another idea that was floated around was by former Mayor Doug McCallum, and he is proposing helicopters. So what do you have to say about that? I mean, it might be a good idea because if somebody's watching all the time, what would you say?
Yeah, helicopters are a very valuable tool. I know in my career, I've seen the use of helicopters find and locate suspects. Oftentimes, we see with crimes like shootings,
Yeah.
people leaving the scene driving very, very dangerously,
Yes.
and that puts the public at risk. And we know that a criminal's behavior is sometimes amplified by police with their lights and sirens on
The chase.
behind the car if
Right.
we're pursuing an individual.
Mhm.
They often drive more dangerously, and sadly we've seen fatalities and injuries because of that. When you have a helicopter up in the sky,
Yeah.
you don't need to do that because the helicopter can follow them from a safe distance and up in the air. And oftentimes they don't know the helicopter is up there. And so we're fortunate that we have police helicopters in the Lower Mainland.
Mhm.
They're run and managed by the RCMP. People will often hear us call them Air 1 or Air 2.
Okay.
That's the RCMP helicopter. And earlier this week, the chief has asked the province to see if we can get more Air 1 RCMP helicopter time in Surrey during certain periods of time that we know that the suspects in these, especially the shooting incidents,
Yeah.
are doing these shootings. And so now that we have, unfortunately, almost 50 plus shootings behind us,
Yeah.
we've seen patterns in their behavior. And so we know some of the times and days of the week that they're operating.
Right.
So asking for the helicopter to spend more time in Surrey during those times, we think will give us a better chance of catching those suspects.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not a bad idea. Tell me about what is new in extortions. We talked to John Brewer just the other day. He gave us an update on 4 months. And what, from your perspective, is different? You did talk about you have kind of a recognition of their pattern, what times kind of they're operating, that kind of thing. What other kinds of information can you give us that's allowed for the public to know?
Yeah, there's I think people will hopefully appreciate there's not a lot of details we can share
Okay.
because we know that criminals often will listen to these interviews too, and they will change their ways of doing things.
Sure.
But we know they'll use stolen vehicles. That should be no surprise to anybody. We know that they often swap license plates to make it harder for us or people in the community to see if the license plate should be on a vehicle. So with respect to that, we often encourage people to, when you're going out to your car, check to make sure your license plates are on it. Check to make sure the right license plate is on it. Often people just ignore their license plates and get in their car and
Yeah.
go grocery shopping or pick up their kids
I
or
think
whatever it is.
most of us do.
Yeah, it's one of those sort of subconscious things that we just take for granted that I'm not going to check my license plate because I'm just assuming that my
It's
license
there.
plate is on my car.
You're right.
So check and make sure. And obviously, if it's not, that's something that we need to know about. And the other piece of it that sort of ties into that is please phone us. If you notice something amiss, especially with something like your vehicle or your license plate,
Yeah.
please phone police because the swapping of those license plates may have been captured on CCTV footage.
Right. Okay, so there is a theory out there, and I don't know how candid you can be with this, but there's a theory out there that this is kind of a Robin Hood type of situation. I did ask John Brewer a bit about this, where it's all about people that have wronged someone. So LMIAs, I think they're called. It's when someone is sold, the idea that they can come and work here, but they're paying $80,000 to come and work here from other countries, and then they're treated unfairly,
Mhm.
or young women are lured into very vulnerable situations with older men and they're extorted in a different type of way. I think you know what I'm alluding to. Those types of situations, and now it's kind of almost like a vigilante justice type of feeling. So these people that are getting extorted, I've heard that perhaps it's kind of tit for tat or revenge or do justice. What would you say about that?
Well, I'd say if that's the case, that's very unfortunate and quite frankly disheartening. I think if there are, and it sounds to me like there's the potential for crimes or something amiss in there. Yeah. So, rather than going and getting a gun illegally and shooting up someone's house and putting all of us at risk, before you do that, contact authorities so that we can investigate potentially what your grievances are. Two wrongs don't make a right. And so before we get to extortions and shootings in our communities, we want to be able to prevent it from getting there. So, I would say if you find yourself in a vulnerable situation where you feel like your only option here might be doing something like this, please phone the authorities so that we can investigate, so you don't have to get to this.
Right. And there has been a letter from Mayor Brenda Locke to the federal government, to the public safety minister, asking for a commissioner to oversee everything. And it's basically an appeal saying we're in Surrey and we need help. What do you make of that?
We do need help. Earlier this week, the chief asked for additional officers from the province and support, and we're having conversations with the province around that. There is no doubt that if help doesn't come and we don't work together at all levels to find solutions to this, we will find ourselves in a multi-year extortion crisis. This has been going on for several years in other communities, and we need to do everything we can be doing to not get to that here in Surrey. The extortions have been happening in cities like Edmonton and Calgary and Brampton, Peel, and many other cities. Before it spreads to even more cities, having someone who can coordinate at a higher level, have the ear of all levels of government, is probably not a bad idea.
Sergeant Houghton, if you want to give a message to the community of Surrey that's watching right now, what would you want to tell them?
What I would say to the community is we share your concerns. We hear your concerns. We want to hear more. We want to hear your ideas. We want to work with you. I would say also that as we've seen many times before, unfortunately, in times where we've been through gang violence, it's only through working with the community and the community working with the police that we found long-term lasting solutions. We need to be united. We need to work together. We appreciate the community's support, and we continue to need that.
One thing, thank you for the message. One thing we should point out, and it's very important, is that if somebody does want to report something, we're all a little scared on edge. I don't have any information, but if somebody out there, somebody watching right now has information, how can they report it to you and keep themselves anonymous? Is it Crime Stoppers or is there more than that?
Yeah, if you have information and you want to report that, the best way to do that and remain anonymous is through Crime Stoppers. There are other ways. If you don't mind the police knowing who you are, you can phone our non-emergency numbers, with whichever police agency. You can phone 911 if it's an emergency. And then there is also the extortion tip line that was set up last year, where there's the potential for reward money if you're willing to provide information and essentially be a witness.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sergeant Houghton.
Thank you.
So we did get some answers from Sergeant Lindsay Houghton. There are more answers to come. He could share only what he could share. The police are doing what they can. There's a lot of stuff that goes into police work behind the scenes that we don't know about. Sometimes their hands are tied and they can't do what they need to do. That's up to lawmakers and government. So we need our MPs to step up and talk to the government, and they are the government, to make sure that things are changed so that processes move quickly and we can expedite sentencing and making sure that criminals are locked up. You can see behind me, we've got two cars right behind me, Surrey Police Service and RCMP. They are working together. The task force is working together. They are trying to make our streets safer. So a thank you to them for putting their lives at risk every single day. And hopefully we can get some traction with all of these extortion attempts in Surrey. A few good ideas by the former mayor of Surrey, Doug McCallum, Linda Annis, councillor, and she's also vying for the mayorship in October. And she had some good ideas about traffic lights. And Mayor Brenda Locke, who appealed and asked the federal government to please help Surrey. We do need the help, and it is tedious, and hopefully it will come along soon. Reporting for Sanjha TV, I'm Sonia West. Thank you for watching, and stay with us for updates.